Your fantasy football season is in make or break territory. The week 5 waiver wire actually has a ton of appealing options. Stick around. I have a super sleeper out of the week that no other waiver wire video is talking about that is going to help win
What's
us
up? It's
our
Woody
leagues
Marks.
down the
Can't wait to
stretch.
get
Of
out there
course,
to
we
meet the
have to
fans,
begin
meet the
with
family.
Woody Marks. I've been on Woody Marks since the very first waiver wire video on this channel. Go back and look week 1. No one else was telling you to add Woody Marks, but I certainly was. I've been pounding the table. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry, 2.9 yards after contact per attempt, forcing 0.28 missed tackles per attempt. That is top 15 in the NFL. He was awesome on Sunday. 119 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns against the Tennessee Titans. Sadly, it's just over for Nick Chubb, averaging 4.0 yards per carry, career low in success rate other than last year. I mean, it's basically Nick Chubb used to be the greatest pure runner in the NFL. He is no longer the greatest pure rusher in the NFL. I would basically say that Woody Marks at this stage has an ability to be a top 15 running back in fantasy football. And if he is not owned in your league, it is your job watching this video. Spend 75% of your FAAB. Go and get Woody Marks in fantasy football. All right, next up, we have Jaxson Dart, who I think is pretty much a sneaky ad. Jaxson Dart did not pass very well. You guys are seeing a 48.9 pass grade, no big time throws, only a 7.28 Davis. Why would we want to add Jaxson Dart? I mean, he just lost Malik Neighbors for the season. Well, folks, I'll tell you exactly why. Jaxson Dart, who was a great runner in college, I think this was something that was really under-discussed about his prospect profile. Look at all these great rushing games. 14 for 136 and 2 against Georgia Tech. Had a really strong running game against Texas Tech in a bowl game. A bunch of games over 40 yards. His scramble rate was really high. And I think that was something that a lot of people missed about picking up Jaxson Dart on the waivers last week. Remember in last week's waiver video, he was our secret ad. Jaxson Dart was at the end of the video as the secret ad. They were already kind of subbing him in those Taysom Hill packages in the offense. He had 10 rushing attempts and most of them were actually designed. He had two zone read runs. He had 4 gap runs, and then 3 of them were scramble attempts. He also had, I believe, a 26-yard scramble that was called back by a penalty, kind of a tic-tac penalty on 3rd and long. Now, is Jaxson Dart going to hold up the entire year running this much? I can't say, you can't say, no one can say. But I do know that with Malik Neighbors out, they're going to be running a ton of 12 personnel with Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger both on the field. And that is going to set him up well to do those zone read runs with Cam Scatterbo. I would spend 10 to 15% of my wager budget if I've been, buying guys like Geno Smith or Sam Darnold, which is not to say that you're going to be starting Jaxson Dart every game for the rest of the year. But in terms of a quarterback off the waiver wire who can end up becoming a top 10 fantasy quarterback, a quarterback who is going to run 10 times per game is exactly what we look for. So make sure that you are adding Jaxson Dart. This one is as surprising to me as it is to you guys, but Kendre Miller is really weaving himself into being a top running back ad. The New Orleans Saints, after starting out the year going really heavy passing, Spencer Rattler dropping back over 40 times, they had a really ground and pound approach against the Buffalo Bills. And part of the reason they were able to do that is that Kendre Miller was awesome. He averaged 4.82 yards after contact average. His rushing touchdown, 11 rushes for 65 yards. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch his rushing touchdown. It was really phenomenal, tough running. He was way more efficient than Alvin Kamara, 5.4 yards per carry. Kamara, 3.1. His snap share was up to 41%. Last week, he got 33% of the team's rushing attempts. He got 11% of the routes. Now, we do need him to start earning some targets if we are going to, be starting him in fantasy football at any point. But he's the clear handcuff to Alvin Kamara, which is valuable in and of itself because Kamara is an older running back. Older running backs suffer injuries. We actually saw at the end of last season, Kendre got 2 starts, but the New Orleans Saints were so banged up and so bad that I believe he had 18 rushes for 21 yards over his 2 starts. This version of the New Orleans Saints is slightly better. Olave, Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson are giving defenses something to think about, and the offensive line is healthy as well. But Kendre Miller is the sort of guy who your league's not going to go crazy for. You're not going to have to spend, 20% of your waiver budget to get Kendre Miller. So he would be my number 2 running back out of the week after only Woody Marks. Next up, we have Sean Tucker, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I suppose you could toss Rachaad White in this list as well. Bucky Irving is currently scheduled to have an MRI on his ankle. According to reports on Twitter, basically what happened is his ankle got rolled up on in the Week 4 game against the Buccaneers, but Bucky Irving is a tough guy. He was full of adrenaline. He gutted it out for the rest of that game. If Bucky Irving were to miss significant time with an ankle injury, I do think this could be one of those scenarios where the running back 2 largely stays in their role, the running back 1 is out, and the running back 3 on the team gets promoted to a role that is much closer to what the running back 1 has done. I mean, we've seen this countless times throughout NFL history where the passing down, long down and distance back more or less stays in their role. The Buccaneers are primed to be one of those teams because they have clearly segmented roles between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. 71% of the long down and distance snaps for Rachaad White, only 29% for Bucky Irving. Meanwhile, all the short down and distance is Bucky Irving. That is the way that it looks like it's going to be going for me. People do actually forget this. Sean Tucker was considered a really high-end prospect, but he had heart issues, so he ended up being an undrafted free agent. Sean Tucker has actually already had one unbelievable career game. He played 37% of the offensive snaps last year in a game that Rachaad White missed, and he had more fantasy points than Bucky Irving, 14 rushes for 136 yards, 3 receptions for 56 yards, and a touchdown. He basically has been a really good, tough runner. Every time the Buccaneers coaching staff has been asked about Sean Tucker, they've been like, yeah, we love this guy. We like Rachaad. We like Bucky in their roles, but we have to find a way to get Sean Tucker the ball. You should be able to sneak Sean Tucker through on your waivers, like relatively cheaply, particularly if Rachaad White is out there in your league. Rachaad White is going to go, if it's confirmed that Bucky's going to miss some time, for 50, 60% of the FAAB, and Sean Tucker should be able to get through a little bit more cheaper there. So I do like Sean Tucker as an ad. All right, what a mess the Washington Commanders backfield has been, but we do need to talk about Chris Rodriguez here. It's a clear 3-way split. Chris Rodriguez has been the nominal starter. I don't know why they do this, but Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has not played on the first 2 drives for the Commanders in any game this year. My guess is that basically the team doesn't want this 7th-round rookie to think of himself as a starter. JCM has handled 37% of the snaps since Eckler's been out. Chris Rodriguez has handled 39%, 29% of the rushes for JCM, 35% for Chris Rodriguez. They basically split the inside the 5 work. They've split the short down and distance. Chris Rodriguez has not scored a touchdown, and JCM has. I could see this backfield going either way. And if JCM gets dropped in your league, I would rather have him than Chris Rodriguez. But I know that I've got some tough teams out there, not great running back 2 situations. Chris Rodriguez has been, over 30% of the snaps in back-to-back games. He is getting some high value touches inside the red zone. I definitely don't think he's anything like a league winner. I would think that would be closer for JCM if he was able to totally overtake Chris Rodriguez, but he is useful depth in a 12-team league. The top wide receiver ad this week is Isaiah Bond. I have a feeling that other waiver wire videos and waiver wire articles are not going to give you Isaiah Bond because they don't pay enough attention to football games. But with Cedric Tillman out, what happened for the Cleveland Browns was Bond subbed in their base personnel, which for the Browns is 2 tight ends, because Harold Fannin Jr., remember him from our week 1 waiver wire video, actually is basically the slot wide receiver for this team. It certainly would have been possible for Bond to not fit in as a boundary wide receiver, but when Tillman went out against the Lions, that's what he did. You see, he actually had his best game in terms of his PFF grade there, which sort of makes sense for him to be good against the Lions. He had 3 for 58, a 73% PFF grade. His route rate was super high. 96% of the routes is really strong for him. And it's hard to remember this, but Isaiah Bond was once viewed as a really good prospect. He had that weird legal situation before the NFL draft that resulted in him being an undrafted free agent. He signed really late in the process. What I did on the RotoViz prospect box score scout was run him as a 3rd-round pick. I gave him 75 overall draft capital. I put his listed weight in 181. I put his 40 time in at 439. Look at these prospect comps. I mean, obviously some clear misses. Trey Tucker, not great. John Mechie, not great. McCole Hardman, not great. But you do have Terry McLaurin in there. You do have Ladd McConkey in there. And weirdly, I don't think that Ladd is that poor of a comp. You guys are probably rolling your eyes right now. But Ladd played with a bunch of other NFL players. Isaiah Bond also played with a bunch of other NFL players at Texas. Matthew Golden starting right away for the Packers. Bond obviously transferred from Alabama, where he played with a ton of NFL players and future NFL players. I do think that there is meat on the bone for Bond there. I think that Flacco probably is going to be benched this upcoming week, and maybe Bond will be better and more athletic than Jerry Jeudy at this stage of their career. So Bond, I would go up to 10 to 15%. I think if I really needed a wide receiver, like if I had just lost Tyreek Hill, we're heading into the buys, maybe I'd been starting Matthew Golden, I would go to 10 to 15% of my waiver wire budget on Isaiah Bond. Don't go nuts, because I don't think the ceiling is that high, but Bond is the most intriguing wide receiver ad this week. No matter what happens in a fantasy football season, we always end up talking about Darius Slayton. The Malik Neighbors injury obviously opens the door. Slayton is going to be much more than just a 9-route guy for the Giants right now, which is basically the route that, that is what he was before this happened. Darius Slayton was doing one thing on this offense. He was running in one direction. His average depth of target, 13.1, and really that was only decreased because of the game against the Chiefs, where he played a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. Average depth of target in his other games, 17, 17, and 16.5. Obviously, as we can see from his Pro Football Reference page, we are very familiar with what Slayton can do in this role. 5 for 154 in 2. He has been involved in multiple Best Ball Mania, high scoring underdog fantasy football teams as well. I don't know if Slayton is better than Wan'Dale. Like, Wan'Dale, I think, is going to earn more targets. Wan'Dale obviously is already owned in a ton of leagues because what he did in week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys. But I do know that Slayton is available in a lot of leagues. I know that a lot of teams are hurting big time at wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, just huge busts at the wide receiver position up and down. Like, would I rather start Darius Slayton or Calvin Ridley moving forward? I mean, honestly, I really might rather start Darius Slayton. I'm also pretty high on Jaxson Dart compared to the consensus. And if I'm higher on Dart than the consensus, that I need to like Slayton. Also, just a quick note here. I think that Theo Johnson is also a low-end ad at the tight end position. Looking at the Giants usage stuff from the last couple weeks, I mean, Theo Johnson has been out there a good bit, 68% of the routes, 78% of the snaps. Same utilization score as Darius Slayton, but you're able to get his points at tight end instead of at wide receiver. I do think that Slayton is pretty cheap. I don't think you want to spend more than 5% of your budget on Slayton or on Theo Johnson, but I like this iteration of the Giants. I think they're going to be more fun on offense than they would have been had Russell Wilson started. Obviously would prefer Wan'Dale if he's out there in your league, but Slayton and Theo Johnson are nice little 3 to 5% waiver wire ads. I can't believe we are talking about this guy in 2025, but I do think that Darren Waller is a pretty strong tight end ad. His route rate was very low. He only ran 36% of the routes for the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football, but he scored 2 touchdowns. He had a 40% targets per route run. Tyreek Hill is out for the year. Just while we're here, Malik Washington is kind of a fine ad. I think you could do $2 or $3 on him. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine replaced Tyreek Hill as the wide receiver in base personnel. And that's actually better for Darren Waller because Nick Westbrook-Ikhine cannot earn targets. Malik Washington can earn targets to some degree. Is Darren Waller going to score 2 touchdowns for the rest of the season? I mean, I don't know, but it was pretty clear from watching the game that Mike McDaniel signed Darren Waller for a reason, has a plan for Darren Waller, and Darren Waller still has it. I mean, maybe that's the most important thing. Darren Waller absolutely skied for his first touchdown. It was a grown-ass man touchdown reception. So I do like spending, 10% or so of your FAAB bids on Darren Waller. I'm not saying to go crazy here because I think most weeks he will probably see between 2 and 4 targets. And if he doesn't score a touchdown, he just will not have the volume to really impact your fantasy football lineup. But his weekly touchdown projection should probably be pretty good. Who is currently tied with Quentin Johnston for the lead on the Chargers in targets per route run? Oronde Gadsden II, who was basically a tight end in name only when he was at Syracuse. He had a true breakout sophomore season, got injured his junior year, then came back and was really strong on what is a fake video game numbers Syracuse offense. But he has hit the ground running with Will Dissly out. 11% of the team's targets when he's been on the field on only a 38% route share. What I like most about Gadsden was that his route share jumped from 27% in week 3 to 50% in week 4. We saw less of Tyler Conklin. We saw less of Tucker Fisk. It's pretty good. You definitely want Chargers options right now. The Chargers currently lead the NFL in PPR points that are available for pass catchers. Who would have thought that would be a sentence that we'd be saying after a month of the season? But if you're looking for a super sneaky ad that is going to make your buddies mad when they look back and go, oh man, how did we let him get player X? I definitely think Oronde Gadsden is a great candidate for that. So I do think we should be spending, $5-10 on Oronde Gadsden on teams that are not set at tight end this week. I promised you a super sleeper ad of the week. Here it is. Brashard Smith, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the stash that no one else is talking about. He got 8 touches in week 4 on 19 snaps. Of course, that is a season high. He even got a traditional running back carry right out of the I formation, which is not something I thought we would see for several weeks. We also had a great quote from the coaching staff about trying to get him more involved just as like a pure rusher. Again, something that I didn't think was happening. But then you look at the Chiefs rushing game and you're like, yeah, well, I guess that makes sense. You have Isaiah Pacheco, who is averaging 4 yards per attempt, 31 rushing yards per game. His success rate is actually kind of high because he hasn't gotten the ball all that often. Kareem Hunt is averaging 3.2 yards per carry. Neither of them are doing anything in the passing game. Basically, the Chiefs running backs have been awful. As a rushing team, really only Xavier Worthy has had a good rush on the team for this entire year. And I know that Pacheco did just score a touchdown last week, but I think the team is very realistic. There was a Dan Graziano article about how disappointed the team had been in Isaiah Pacheco's recovery from his leg injury. And they also know it's unrealistic for the team to rely on Kareem Hunt over the course of the season. Smith was a super explosive player at SMU. He was, in fact, one of the more explosive running backs in all of college football. And if you are not hip, he also was a converted wide receiver. So I think it's something that he can offer in the receiving game as well. Look at how strong he was as a rusher. I know I've talked about Brashard Smith a lot on this channel. 1,300 rushing yards in college, 3.3 yards after contact average his first season playing running back. But these are the kinds of guys who can help you win your league when your other league mates are just not paying attention. The top ads this week: Woody Marks, Jaxson Dart, Brashard Smith as a sleeper, Kendre Miller, Sean Tucker, Chris Rodriguez at running back, Isaiah Bond and Darius Slayton at wide receiver, Darren Waller and Oronde Gadsden II at tight end. Who is your number 1 waiver wire claim? Drop it in the comments. I'll reply to everyone who comments. Don't just pick players up, pick up wins. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video if this helped, and let's crush the rest of the season.